Hi, this is Steve Stine from Guitarzoom, and I've had a number of people that have been asking me about how to bend and then add vibrato on. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to talk about that a little bit and see if I can help you. But this will require you to already have some knowledge of how to bend and how to do a vibrato, right? And I have a bunch of other videos that talk about both those things if you need to watch something, which is awesome. But basically, bending for me is done by pushing toward the ceiling. Not all the time. I mean, there's sometimes when I do bends that I will move toward the floor, okay? But that's the general idea when I do bends, is that they move toward the ceiling. The general idea of vibrato is that it moves toward the floor. Now, again, that isn't always the case, but if I was on the third string, for instance, doing a vibrato, I would have a tendency of moving it toward the floor. Okay? Now, if I was on the first string or something, I can't move it toward the floor because I would go off the guitar. So in that case, I would have to move toward the ceiling. But as a general rule, when I do bends, they tend to go up, and when I do vibrato, it tends to go down, unless, you know, there's a conflict with something. So the thing about bending is that when you bend, you're creating pressure on that string as you move upward, and you're bending it up a certain distance, whether it be 1 fret or 2 frets, which we call a half step or a whole step, or 3 frets or a blues bend. There's all kinds of different kinds of bends that you can do, all right? So a vibrato then is something different. A vibrato tends to be when you play a note, just a standard note, which I'll call a static note. Just, you know, I'm not bending it or anything. And then what I do is once I've played that note, then I'm adding this vocal technique, which we call a vibrato. Okay, now vibratos can be, and bends for that matter, can be all sorts of different shapes and sizes. They can be fast or slow or really wide and different things like that. But let's get to the point here. So when we do a vibrato, what we're doing is we're pulling a string a certain amount, and that certain amount isn't like a half step or a whole step. It tends to be out of tune. So what happens is when you do your vibrato, you're pulling that string, whether it's toward the ceiling or toward the floor, you're pulling that string just a little bit, which is causing it to go out of tune, and then you're bringing it back to where you started, which is putting it back in tune. So for just a brief moment, it's going out of tune and then coming back. And the trick to a nice smooth vibrato is being able to do that so it's not irregular. Again, unless that's what you're looking for. There's all kinds of really cool things that you can do with the guitar. So I try to stay away from this is the only way you can do this. So I'm just giving you some generalizations here. But when I do a vibrato, the trick is I'm just pulling that string slightly and then returning it back to 0 or static. And I can make it as wide or as small as I want or as fast as I want. That's entirely up to you, okay? When I do a bend is a little different because a bend I'm putting that pressure on and I'm leaving it up there once it gets in tune. So that's what a bend is. And we have all sorts of different bends, obviously. So what happens in a bend with vibrato is you're bending that string up and you're achieving the pitch that you want. You're reaching that goal. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to release the pressure a little bit to drop that bend down. So again, it's a little bit out of tune. You don't have to drop it a half step or anything like that. You're just dropping it. Kind of a cool little harmonic there. But when you bend it up, I'm getting sidetracked, but when you bend it up and you bring it down, the trick is you got to get it back up to the pitch that you initially bent it to. So when I go, I got to be able to get it back up to that. Otherwise, you get this. And then that sounds really weird, okay? So the trick with all of this is understanding that you're trying to do something that is in tune, okay? And then there's elements in between or at the end or whatever it might be that are out of tune. When you bend, all this stuff in between until you get to the desired pitch is basically out of tune. But it adds a really cool human element to your playing. That's why with bending and stuff like that, you don't always have to be in a hurry to get to the bend. You might just enjoy all of this, all the stuff in between, you see? A vibrato, same thing, like we just talked about. A vibrato, it's in tune, and then I'm pulling the string slightly, which is putting it out of tune, and then I'm putting it back in tune again. So the trick to a bend with vibrato is you got to reach the point that you want, that's in tune, and then you're going to release it just a little bit. And it might feel like it's not enough, but start there. Like don't make these just really wide. Okay, and then you get a whole another kind of effect. And again, there's nothing wrong with that either. But for now, try and bend to the desired pitch, and then try and bring it down just a little bit, and then try and bring it back up to that desired pitch. So the trick with all this stuff is don't try and do it fast at first. Try and just listen. And then try and start readjusting a little bit. Now my noise gate is pulling my signal a little bit here, so my bend is dying. But you get the idea. Now, once I get that kind of where it's feeling more comfortable, then what I can do is I can start making that a little faster. If I choose to. Or a little bit wider. I was thinking like Ace Frehley or something like that, which is really wide vibrato bends, right? But there's lots of really neat things that you can do with that. So the nice thing about being able to tag a bend with a vibrato is it adds a really nice melodic flavor to whatever it is you're doing. So if you're playing, okay, as opposed to just bending it up, which kind of sounds unresolved. And again, not that you always have to add a vibrato, but it's a really nice effect to be able to add. Sorry. You see? So it makes it a bit more vocal when you do that. So think about how you're bending and try and work on those for sure to make sure you're doing it right and it feels good and it sounds good and all those sorts of things. Work on your vibrato, doing the same thing. And again, I have all kinds of different videos and stuff like that out there that talk about both of those things. And then when you start trying to add them together, just understand that the approach is going to be a little different, because when you bend, you're creating that pressure. And when you want to add the vibrato, you're releasing some of that pressure and then reapplying that pressure to get to that point. Okay? So it takes a little while to get used to, but hopefully that helps you a little bit. And just understand that, again, take it slow. Enjoy what you're doing and really learn how to listen to it, because, in my opinion, bending and vibrato are two of the most important things that you can learn how to do on this instrument. You know, scales, of course, you need to learn those, and finger exercises and all these other things. But to a really great melodic vocal kind of guitar solo that doesn't need to be fast and it doesn't need all these other things, it's really important for you to be effective when you are trying to, quote unquote, sing with your guitar. And I think bending and vibrato are two great ways of doing that. So take care, stay positive, and keep practicing.